Okay, so yeah, well, welcome everyone. Good evening. Except for Faith and I being in Pacific time now. But my brain just kind of works on Eastern time because of all my colleagues who are back east. Um, and thank you, those of you who stayed. I got the very end of Dr. Freeman's presentation, and AI is a sweet spot for me. So I'm going to have to go and gather up his recording and have a look at that. But we're going to switch gears now and talk about overcoming writer's block or avoiding writer's block and maintaining your motivation. This is a presentation for the Dissertation Writing Circle, which, as Faith said, is a Facebook group that we started several years ago. And this is why I know Vanessa, because she and I did a boot camp together, a dissertation boot camp. And so part of what I say tonight are things that I learned in that kind of process, and as well just living around the dissertation for a really long time. So, just so that you all, the Eastern people, some of you know me, some of you don't know me yet, uh, I was in cohort 8, which it started 10 years ago. It's really weird to think about the fact that we started 10 years ago. Someone posted, one of my cohort posted a picture, sent me a picture that came up in her Facebook from our White Rose ceremony. And that was whatever, like 8 years ago. And so the group of us were all kind of thinking about how quickly time has passed for us. And yet, for me, I was one of the last two to finish my dissertation. I defended in April of 2023 after a very long, strange process, and but very rewarding. And so I will say to those of you who have started writing, this was my mantra: keep going, don't stop. I had a T-shirt. I have stickers. It's something that a member of my dissertation committee would always end her email with that when I sent things to her for comment, when I sent drafts, was keep going, don't stop. And you don't stop until you're done, and then actually you don't stop until a little bit after that, and then you pick up other things to write about. I published, I am slow to publish, so I published my first peer-reviewed article earlier this year along with a research team. We're working on a second one. I'm writing a book chapter. I'm writing a research monograph based on my dissertation. And then you have, the various end century conference proposals and other papers that you work on, as well as I teach. So yeah, I'm always working on something having to do with writing. So it's really kind of a lovely, endless process once you step into this arena. And I just want to say to you, I believe in you. I know you're going to get it done. And Bernita, we're so excited that you're going to be joining the Eastern family, the Eastern community. It is a great program. It's a great community of people. I look forward to crossing paths with you in a number of different arenas. So, so all that is a pretty long introduction. Well, let me see if I could actually advance my slides now. I have it. There we go. Okay. So, oh, I skipped one. So, dealing with writer's block, I want to do a set here and talk about who gets it, what is it, what do we do with it, when does
Doc,
it happen?
pardon me,
And
Dr. Tabata, if you're sharing
yes,
your screen, we can't see it.
you can't see it.
Not
Okay.
yet.
I see who dealing with writer's block.
You see dealing with writer's block?
Yeah.
Okay.
I see it
So
too.
you
Also
do.
see.
Okay. Thank you. It may be a delay. I think Dr. Freeman was kind of experiencing that also. So did the others of you see it or not yet? Yeah. Bernita says,
Courtney sees that we're good.
okay.
Bernita, any better?
Not yet, but I'll be okay. If everyone else can see it, that's fine.
I was like, if you want to log out and log back in,
Right. I'll do that. Thank you.
it's the
Okay.
same link.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. So since the others of you I think can see it, we are just going to talk briefly about who gets it, what is it, like where does it come from, what do we do with it, when does it happen, and what can we do to overcome it? Which is, of course, that last part is probably why you're all here. And we are going to spend some time talking about some techniques and tools that you can use that will help you when you run into it. So, okay. So I switched slides. This is a who. And so who gets it? Well, pretty much everybody, students, writers, professors, anyone who's really trying to deliver a product. You very often will get to a place where it is very difficult for you to write. So, what really is writer's block? Well, so Google, our friend Google, uh, has this wonderful AI summary, whether you really want it or not. And it helpfully actually defined writer's block as a mental or emotional obstacle that prevents a writer from creating new content or progressing with a project. And that actually is a dictionary definition, a Merriam-Webster definition of the phrase writer's block. But that pretty accurately describes what is going on. There is an author, Jerry Jenkins, who has written a number of books about writing. I think he's written, over 20 books. And he also has a blog, and one of his blog entries is about writer's block. And now, what's interesting about his blog is that he starts off with the premise that writer's block is actually a myth. But then he goes on in the other pages of that blog post to talk about the real causes of it and also how to overcome the obstacles that put themselves in the writer's way when you're experiencing this myth of the writer's block. It was kind of goofy. I thought that he started off by saying that it really doesn't actually exist. It's a myth, but then went on to kind of, he said, debunk the myth and give people tools. So overcoming the obstacles can be accomplished if we just take a little time and do some work. So I do want to talk though about the why, because I'm primarily a business professor, so my big thing with my students is always why. Why are you doing this? Why are you writing about this? What is your why? The whole Simon Sinek idea of knowing your why. And Faith brought up our last webinar, the last webinar that I presented to this group, which was about imposter syndrome and about your inner critic. And so I wanted to bring her back since I had I actually worked with my Canva account and had Canva create my inner critic. Her name is Maud. So I wanted to bring Maud to this webinar as well so you all could see her. And really, one of the reasons why we experience writer's block it's actually a brain response. It's an amygdala response. And the amygdala, for those of you who know some brain science, is the fight or flight part of your brain. It responds to fear. It's why we may jump when we're startled. It is a survival mechanism. And so when we're experiencing fear, which is one of the things that Jerry Jenkins identifies that happens when you have writer's block, it's actually an amygdala response. And I relate this very much to my inner critic because Maud here existed definitely with me throughout my dissertation process because she was trying to keep me safe. Now, it wasn't really clear what she was trying to keep me safe from, uh, whatever my fears were. If it was fear of not completing, if it was fear of failure, if it was fear of going into the unknown, there were a lot of these unspecified fears, but she was really trying to be supportive of me, but holding me back at the same time. And one of the ways that that was manifested for me was my self-talk, my telling myself, well, I'll get to this, but maybe it won't work so well, you know. So part of that we're going to talk about in a minute, the next couple of slides, the self-talk. Also, we experience writer's block because we're so busy. So we have work, we have family, and then I put in there, we have the etc., which is the category of life happens. For me, I definitely had a lot of life happening, and that is very common among dissertationers who are adult learners. I think when you, I worked for many years in student services at the University of Southern California, and a lot of the doctoral learners there were traditional doctoral learners. They came straight out of a master's, or they came in to do a master's followed by a PhD. So they were a lot younger. And the things that they were juggling were different from things that you juggle when you are an adult and come and engage with a PhD program. Okay. And that distinction of PhD and what that means when you think about your proposal, when you think about your methods, when you think about your whole project, is a different threshold than some other kinds of doctorates that are out there. And we all know this who are here in this room. So part of that is the etc. that happens. And it leads to certain feelings. So these, I think, were some of the common feelings, at least among my cohort, about that we used to talk about in our group chats and our group texts. So often when working in process, I think doctoral learners, and especially adult doctoral learners, often can feel very defeated, overwhelmed, and stuck. And so just looking at these pictures that I tried to curate for this slide deck, which I will send to Faith and have her put up with the recording. Really, I think these are very common feelings since I mentioned Vanessa and I, who Vanessa's a guest on the webinar this evening attending. And I think we found this to be common in our cohort of women who were working together to make progress in our dissertations, that we felt very defeated because we had been doing things and we maybe hadn't made as much progress as we wanted. We felt stuck. We felt stalled in some cases. In the case of my cohort, there were people who took a leave of absence and then came back. And I will say that those who did take an intentional leave of absence and then come back were able to successfully complete their dissertation process, their work they defended. and they are doctors now, which is great. You also can have a sense of feeling overwhelmed. Part of it is that etc. and the work and family and other things from the previous slide, but also just within your work, within your data itself. You get the data and you're sitting with the data and you want to sort and make sense of the data, but you feel like this guy with all of his paragraph markers, his section markers that are all coming at him. There is so much that you need to sort out and try to have some balance with the other parts of your life that it can feel very, very overwhelming. So, that being said, then it also leads to obstacles that we need to overcome. And as dissertation writers and as nascent researchers, I think these may be the top three, at least among people within my own cohort and other dissertation writers that I have worked with subsequently. Part of it is mindset. And the mindset is related to my friend Maud, my inner critic, and part of that self-talk. That having a mindset that is at once curious about what you get to do as a doctoral learner, and at the same time, having this self-talk about maybe you won't be successful, maybe I need to protect you from yourself, maybe I need to, think about the consequences of what happens when I finish, if I finish, all of these things. That self-talk is really related a lot to one's mindset. And so what really needs to happen often among doctoral uh, learners and dissertation writers is to have a whole mindset shift about visualizing yourself as being successful and also thanking your inner critic for protecting you, but having her move on her way for a while so that you can actually get work done. That middle slide is perfectionism, right? So I'm sure that nobody here in this room feels like everything has to be perfect before you turn it in, right? I see some smiles, I see some nods, and this is me, the middle slide. The perfectionism is really, really a killer. So that whole saying that I know that you've already heard a million times, a good dissertation is a done dissertation. And I had two of my friends in my cohort who said, this is not going to be the last piece of work that you do. This is not going to be probably the best piece of work that you're going to do. But once you finish, it will be done. And that's important. That's the important piece. Don't hold on to it until you feel like it's bulletproof. One of my best friends from my cohorts said to me in a messenger post, just let it go, Mary. Just give it over to your committee. That's what they are there for. And I did. I did it that week. And I wrote to him and I said, how do you know me? Because you know that that's exactly what I was doing. And he said, because I know you, because we were in class together, we did comps together, all of these things. And I know you want it to be perfect, but it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be done. And it has to be good enough. And then you get to fix it on the other end. So the perfectionism is really an obstacle when we're thinking about a dissertation or a writing project or a proposal. You let it go and get the feedback from the other side. If you get close to the mark, it doesn't have to be right in the center of the target. You can still get points if you're close. And finally, fear. We've already talked about fear and where it comes from in the brain. There is often a fear of, if I finish this, then what comes next? Which is why I shared with you at the beginning that your writing days will not be over, I promise you, once you finish your dissertation. Because what will happen to you, maybe, is what happened to me last year at the International Leadership Association conference in Chicago, when Dr. Chang said to me, you know, you really should publish your dissertation as a book. And I said, really? And she said, yes, I think you really should look into that. Subsequently, one of my friends who encouraged me about it not being the best or the last thing that I would ever do published his dissertation with Springer. And so I followed his lead and worked with an editor there. And last week went under contract with Springer to turn my dissertation into a research monograph to be published next year. So you see, it will just keep following you. It won't be done even when you feel like it's done. So you manage the fear and you walk through the fear, and that saying, the only way out is through. You just keep going. Don't stop. The other fun thing that happens with us when we are writing a dissertation is that we seem to do a lot of things instead of writing. So I know that that was definitely true for me. If Dr. Hernandez were here, and she'll probably hear the recording, but she could tell you I wrote a blog post during my lit review, and it was called My Lit Review and My Spice Cupboard, because I was in the middle of my lit review and I had, you know, my 5 big baskets that I was writing about, and I didn't want to look at it anymore. And so I alphabetized my spice cupboard, and I took a picture of it and I put it online. Uh, and I sent it to Dr. Hernandez, and she said, "This is really great, but you know, you should work on your lit review." So I did a lot of procrastinating. Uh, I worked in a master's program when I worked in student services, and my academic boss uh, taught the research methods and the foundation of the thesis. We were the only program in the business school that required a thesis, and she used to talk about her procrastinating when she was working on her dissertation, that she dusted the baseboards of her house because she didn't want to look at her dissertation anymore. So those are just some examples of some ways that we procrastinate. We also, especially these days, can be highly distracted, right? That picture is many different kinds of social media and online services where you could spend a lot of time, especially like Pinterest, because there are things related to research and lit review and writing dissertations, and you can pin all of these things into your Pinterest boards and spend just a whole lot of time doing that instead of writing, right? And then avoidance, and that picture is kind of interesting because the computer is out, right? The computer is out, but there's also like all this gift wrapping and kind of homemaking, crafting things that are going on. So there are other ways that you could distract yourself and avoid, actually doing work on your dissertation, especially with all of the wealth of things and ways to shop and ways to stream things and listen to music, rather than to actually focus and do your work. So those are some of the things that we do instead of writing. So now I want to move into how we can overcome some of those obstacles and actually get to work and remain motivated while we're doing this. So you can adopt a schedule and write frequently. And by frequently, a lot of people write every day. And depending on what group you're with or what book you're reading, it recommends that you write every day. But I say write frequently because sometimes people just can't write every day. So if you have a schedule where you know you're going to write four 4 days a week in some kind of block chunked time, then that's pretty doable. Often, what will happen when you are writing, I don't know if this happens for you. I know that it happened for me. I think I was writing my results chapter, and I couldn't stop writing on the Saturday that I had chosen that I was just going to spend a couple hours putting in the data and putting in the tables. And I actually drafted the whole thing in one day because I couldn't stop and I got very motivated. And so I thought I'm just going to go with this flow and let everything else go. So that's the other thing, is to recognize maybe you're going to get on a roll and to kind of honor that. Hopefully, all of you in this room have read Anne Lamott's great book, Bird by Bird. We had read it in our cohort, and I think it was added to the class after we left. It does not have to do with dissertation writing. It has to do kind of with writing on its own, as well as her approach to life. The title comes from her father's advice to her brother, who had procrastinated writing a report about birds when he was in school and was panicking the night before it was due. And their father said to him, "You just do it bird by bird, bird by bird by bird." She is incredibly funny. Her audiobooks are very worthwhile. You can listen to it while you're procrastinating or while you're making revisions. But she is just a wonderful, engaging speaker. You can find an accountability partner or a writing group, and people ask about that. I know that's one reason that we did start the dissertation writing circle on Facebook, is to host group writes. So all that means is that everybody comes together for 2 hours on Zoom. You check in with each other. You say this is what you're working on, and you go and you write for 50 minutes and you come back and check in unless you're on a roll, and then you just write through the check-in. You can also find groups that are free to just sit in a Zoom room and write with other people. So I still do that. I participated in a number of groups called Shut Up and Write, and those are on a website, Shut Up and Write, and also through the Meetup app, you can find them. There are some that meet in person now. I was writing a lot of my dissertation, my proposal pieces during the pandemic. So there was not the opportunity to meet in person, but some write in person. Some have gone back to meeting in person, but a number of them meet online. And there are groups that are in Europe and in Australia. So there's always somebody up and writing. If you just kind of do a broad search, so maybe you work really well in the middle of the night. Probably somebody in Europe is writing at that point in a group, and you can just join and check in with them. It's a really great resource. So I really encourage you to do that, as well as finding dissertation specific groups to write with, because then all of us feel kind of the same pain, depending on which chapter you're in. It's just really helpful to have that accountability and perspective. So I want to just give you a couple of slides of useful techniques, and some you're probably already familiar with. The Pomodoro timer, that's why the tomatoes are there. It's you set a timer, and there's actually a plugin usually for different browsers for Chrome and for Firefox. I know where it's a little tomato, and you set the timer and you write for that amount of time. When the time goes off, then you can stop or you can do another round. There's also an app called Forest, and that works very similarly to the Pomodoro timer. You set a certain length of time and you grow trees. You grow little virtual trees. And actually, after you grow a certain number of trees, then the company goes and plants a tree, a real tree for you somewhere in the world. The Forest app is really kind of fun because you can friend each other. You can have friends on Forest. I'm probably the only one of our cohort of dissertation bootcamp people who still uses it because everyone else has gone on. But I really like my trees, and so and I save up points so that I can get different seedlings and grow them into different trees. That sounds dumb. Go have a look at it. It's really cute, a really, really cute app. I put a set of stairs in there to emphasize micro stepping. And let me explain to you what micro stepping is. Micro stepping is part of how you overcome the obstacle of being overwhelmed. When you're looking at your whole chapter and you're saying, I have to write 30 pages on this, and this is, dreaming the impossible dream. So with micro stepping, you actually take a task and break the task down. Say it's writing, one subsection of your lit review. So you break that task down into much smaller tasks and literally into things that you can execute in 5 or 10 minutes. So what can you do in 10 minutes? You can scan an article and you can write a very high level summary of what you've read, or you could skim 2 abstracts and you can write a couple of sentences or highlight the keywords in those abstracts. So you create micro tasks that roll up into the bigger piece that you want to get done. And what happens with that is that's also a way to deal with the neuroscience of what's preventing you from accomplishing these bigger tasks. One of the other things that the amygdala does besides the fear is it is the fight or flight. And often it will say to you, I am not sure that I can keep us safe and I can keep us alive while you're doing this big task. So you actually work with the amygdala and you trick it and say, well, I'm spending 5 minutes doing this. And, actually address that fear about staying alive, having enough water, being able to eat a piece of fruit, all those things. If I do this for 5 minutes, we're going to be okay. And then your brain says, oh, okay, well, you can do that for 5 minutes because, yeah, we're going to be okay. I can still keep us alive. The other thing that happens, though, is as you achieve these micro goals and the micro steps, is that it's easier to then accomplish bigger tasks because it's all rolling up to this bigger check mark that you want to get done. So it's a nice way to kind of work around your brain working against you to have the neuroscience of, I am going to work towards this goal, and my feelings are not going to stop me. My fear is not going to stop me because I can get this stuff done. And, by the end of 3 days, you've looked at, 10 abstracts. That really helps you achieve the goal of being able to write the subsection that you wanted to write. So microstepping is something that I actually was coached on when I was stuck in a subsection of my lit review and not knowing how I was going to get it done. So I recommend it to as many people as I can because it's actually really a helpful way to get bigger goals done. And that's true not only for your dissertation, but also other things that you may be working on. And so I also want you to celebrate those wins that you have. If you took 5 minutes with your literature, then that's a high five. That's awesome because that was your goal for that day. And those are wins that are really important to celebrate. Check in with your accountability buddy, check in with your cohort group and say, I had a win today. I had 2 wins today. And it keeps you going and it helps you with your progress. It helps really with that motivation. These are all ways to manage your motivation. So a few more useful techniques. There is a book called Habit Stacking by S.J. Scott. On the final slide, which is coming up, I am giving links to a lot of these things. So again, I'll give the deck to Faith and we'll make sure that all of you get this and anybody listening to the recording also you can get it. Habit stacking is really interesting. He talks about how there are things that you already are doing. So you brush your teeth, you could stack another habit on top of that because you know that you're going to do that however many times a day. And so you stack habits on things that you're already doing, and then those become bound together. So it's really interesting. He has a great website as well where a lot of those resources are free so that you can practice stacking your habits. So it can do with writing, it can do with researching, it can do with working on your data, that you just are going to stack that time on top of something that you're already doing, which also leads to time management, my melting clock there. You do want to manage your time, but give yourself grace, right? So maybe your 10 minutes on your micro step, you have to break into 2 5-minute chunks. That's good. That's fine. That's not going to hurt anything. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's also important to give yourself a break, which is the third bullet there, is to stay connected with each other, to stay connected with other writing partners that you may pick up, to stay connected with your cohort. And you may want to use a coach. I know I coach dissertation writers. There are others who also coach people through the dissertation process. And it can be very helpful because it's somebody who helps you on your journey, who is not there to do the work, who is separate from our faculty, who are awesome and who are so supportive of us at Eastern through the process. And that's different from some other places. But it's just another set of eyes, ears, and hands that are there to support you during this process. So I will leave you with all of these lovely links, which will be in the hard copy that we will send out. If you're not a member already of the Dissertation Writing Circle, probably most of you are. So that's the direct link to it. I wanted to give you the link to Jerry Jenkins' blog post on writer's block being a myth, but how to overcome it. Some light reading on the amygdala. It's just the WebMD article. It's kind of fun so that you know more about your brain. Very exciting. And then links to the 2 books that I talked about, Al Lamott's Bird by Bird and Habit Stacking by S.J. Scott. And finally, then please reach out to me anytime. Most of you have my email already. If you don't, then there it is. I am more than happy to talk with you, to chat with you, to chat with a group of you in your cohort, to talk to you individually about how it's going, about your process. So please don't hesitate, and Faith knows that that's true. I'm available for for people, especially Eastern people who may just need a friendly ear. Uh, and you do get through it. I will tell you guys that when I was looking at doctoral programs, I looked at a number of doctoral programs, and I chose Eastern because of the cohort characteristic. That for me, I thought that was really important, and it did prove to be very important. As I say, we had people who took a break and came back, and were able to finish, and were still connected to us, to their original cohort, even though they may have finished, the last half of the third year with somebody else. Then we were all still very much together. So that's actually the end of my slides now. It will be very interesting to see if I can stop sharing so I can see all of you. There we go. Thank you. Any questions? Anything that anybody is curious about?
I have a question, but I'll see if anybody else has a question first. Okay. So, how do you stay motivated when it seems like your chair is taking an excessive amount of time to give you feedback back?
So that's a great question, by the way, and that happened.
Oh, you have no idea.
Not so no, so Dr. Franklin was my chair, and that was done intentionally because because I know him. I knew the speed at which he worked, right? And I was like, get it, get it all. He was the one who had to wait on me because of all of my etc. Right? So that's where it's really important, Faith, to have that connection piece and reach out to your community, to your cohort, to your co-writers, right? Because we had a subgroup that broke off of the dissertation writing circle while all of us were in process writing and sending drafts, and that did happen with people's chairs. And the thing about it was that they were able to bring that to the group week by week, right? And get suggestions about what they could work on next, um, while they were waiting for that feedback, and just get the input from the group about what could they be doing while they were waiting for that important feedback on what they had submitted, right? Where could they go that wasn't dependent on this piece that was going to come back, if they were going to have to change something. And definitely, I think there were five of us. We could problem solve what was not, like if you have a big dependency table, what wasn't going to be dependent on that particular piece of feedback that they were waiting for, that they could go and do some other things with their coding of other things, with, refining things, even to the point of even working on the references, right? To format and everything, to just have a look at stuff coming out of RefWorks or Mendeley or Zotero, just to clean stuff up so that they could keep working and keep engaged and keep coming back to the group that was writing. And also having a place that was very safe for them to vent about what was going on. I hear you.
Anybody else have any questions? Any lasting words of wisdom?
Uh, well, no, it's great to be with you guys. Is anyone from your cohort going to ILA this year?
Tara and Theo are going to ILA.
Okay, cool.
Okay. And then you were saying that you were doing some writing.
Yeah.
What were you published on this year?
Um, our little research group that presents a lot at ILA wrote an article on generative AI, which is yeah. So I heard Dr. Freeman talking about its use in dissertation and in research. And we're working on a second article right now on that's really focused on ethics and framework for doing research with generative AI because um, we proposed a framework, a conceptual framework um, in our article, and so we're actually using the framework to um, see if other people want to use it to construct their how they might go about doing research in using generative AI in teaching and in organizations. Yeah. And then the other writing I'm doing is really highly different. So it's a very interesting stretch. I change hats, right? I'm writing a piece for the Eastern people. If you took the spirituality and leadership class, right? I am working with a colleague on adaptive. No, it's not adaptive. I misspoke. So anyway, we're using biblical leaders as case study for leadership. Okay, so it really reminds me of that paper that I wrote many years ago, right?
For
For
Dr.
Dr.
F.
Franklin's class, right? The Nehemiah stuff that we did, but we actually are using it and we're talking about boundary spanning, right? So I think it'll be a really interesting, fun paper to write. We're not sure where we'll submit it yet, but this is a colleague that I met at the ILA, who's in Vancouver, who he just earned tenure, and we've just been fascinated with this topic for about a year. So we're actually meeting tomorrow to frame out how we're going to do it and what our schedule is for that. The chapter that I am writing is about women's leadership, and I'm working on creating like a feminist adaptive leadership model by doing qualitative research with a certain group of women leaders. So, so it's all of the things. It's all of the things, right? And it's really fun because leadership is so interdisciplinary and it remains pretty wide open depending on what you bring. So it's very exciting. For those of you who are part of the ILA, there is going to be a webinar next week in the evening on uh, that's sponsored by the Trust in Leadership member community, and I'm going to be talking about creating trust in virtual classrooms among students. So that will be it will be a really great webinar, and I'm excited to be invited to participate in that.
Awesome. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Last chance. Any questions?
Any questions? Otherwise, you guys can always email me.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tabata. This was really helpful.
Thank you.